This podcast episode explores the myth of the lone genius, revealing how innovation is often a collective effort. Michael Bender, author of history's Marginalized Innovators, shares stories of overlooked contributors like Ada Lovelace, Nikola Tesla, and Rosalind Franklin, highlighting the impact of credit erasure on history, recognition, and future innovators. The discussion urges a shift toward a more inclusive narrative that values collaboration, diversity, and the complex realities behind scientific and technological breakthroughs. Michael, when you first started researching, did you notice just how deeply the idea of the lone geniuses is woven into our culture? It's almost like every legendary story has this one name at the top, and everyone else barely gets a footnote.
What really struck me was the pattern I kept coming across inventors and scientists whose crucial work got swept into the background. My own dad actually developed a fundamental virology technique, but outside our family, hardly anyone knows. The myth of the lone genius just erases these stories.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how many breakthroughs relied on unsung contributors. Even with something as famous as the polio vaccine, there's a whole cast of people whose efforts made it possible.
Absolutely. And that's where the Nobel Prize story gets interesting. Salk's name is legendary, but it was Enders and his team who got the Nobel for the foundational science. It says something about what our culture chooses to celebrate and what it ignores.
That actually reminds me, let's dig into some of the unsung figures you explore. Ada Lovelace, for example, has become more recognized lately, but you argue her story is still misunderstood, right?
Exactly. She's often called the first computer programmer, but that title doesn't capture the depth of her vision. Her notes on Babbage's analytical engine went way beyond translation. She envisioned the machine creating music, art, and so much more. She imagined things Babbage himself hadn't even considered.
That's wild. She was charting out the idea of computers as creative partners, way before electricity was even a household thing. Do you see parallels in other fields, or is this mainly a tech story?
Oh, it goes way beyond tech. Rosalind Franklin in biology, for example, provided the X-ray images that were key to figuring out DNA's structure. But her contribution was downplayed while Watson and Crick got the credit. Her story stayed largely in the margins. Gender and other biases play a massive role in whose stories we remember.
Honestly, hearing about these stories makes me wonder, what are we losing when people get written out of history? Does it just impact their legacy, or is there a bigger ripple effect?
It's so much bigger than a footnote. When we celebrate only the solo geniuses, we send a message that collaboration doesn't matter. Young people who don't see themselves as that one in a million might never even try. And if you come from a background that's already underrepresented, that message can be especially discouraging.
That's such a good point. I hadn't really thought about how it shapes who even tries to get involved. But doesn't it also affect how teams are funded or supported?
Definitely. If all the recognition and resources go to the most visible individual, then teams and collaborative projects get overlooked. It can stifle entire ecosystems of innovation. Plus, it's just a loss for history. Not knowing the real story behind a breakthrough means we miss out on understanding how progress actually happens.
So, how do we actually start changing this story? If the lone genius's myth is so sticky, what can we do to highlight the real web of innovation?
For me, it starts with how we teach history. If classrooms and media show that every big idea came from a mix of thinkers, mentors, and collaborators, then kids learn that their own contributions matter even if their name isn't in the spotlight. We need stories that show the messy, collective process, not just the final eureka moment.
I love that. It feels more human, too, because honestly, no one does this stuff alone. And the creative process is usually pretty chaotic before it's ever legendary.
Right. And when we recognize all kinds of brilliance theorists, engineers, the people who kept the lab running late at night, we open up more space for different talents and backgrounds. That's how you build a stronger, more inclusive innovation culture.
Hearing all this, I keep thinking, what can listeners actually do to help shift the narrative? Is it just about awareness? Or is there more?
Awareness is the first step, but sharing these stories is just as important. When someone hears about an overlooked innovator, they can talk about it, write about it, teach it. And for those in leadership or education, actively noticing and crediting everyone's contributions makes a real difference.
Totally. So, whether you're in a classroom, a lab, or even just chatting with friends, You have the power to broaden the story. Michael, thanks for bringing all this to light and giving us a new lens on what genius really looks like.
Thanks, Mary. Honestly, these conversations matter. The more people question the old myths, the more room we make for the next generation of creative, collaborative breakthroughs.